So, a question I get all the time is from anxious, preoccupied individuals, and they ask me, do I have to finish healing before I start dating? And in this video, I'm going to cover some really important things that you should know, 5 things in particular that are very valuable to know. And we'll talk about sort of the short answer to the question and also realize that it's not necessarily an all or nothing answer. There's a lot of nuances here. And as long as we can execute effectively on the nuances, it's not harmful to start dating before you've finished healing. So we'll talk about what that means a little bit as well, too. First and foremost, the short answer is no, you don't have to stay single completely in order to heal and in order to, focus on your healing journey. And a sort of secondary nuance part of this is, it may speed up your healing process to stay single for a while on your own, especially if you're very anxious leaning, because anxious leaning individuals have such a tendency to get into relationships and just start self-abandoning their own needs, their own boundaries, their own dreams, their own goals, their own sort of like priorities that they have to take into consideration from the inside out. And obviously, that's part of the nature of how codependency works, right? Codependent patterns essentially mean that in order to feel like you are surviving at a subconscious level, you will prioritize this connecting to others, this staying in relationship to others as a way of getting your needs met, rather than realizing that, hey, I actually can carve out space for my own dreams, my own life, my own goals. And if I'm meeting some of those things within the relationship to myself intentionally, I can actually fill a lot of my cup halfway. So with all of that being said, essentially, if you are having this codependent nature, right, or technically nurture, because it was programmed into you essentially, but if you have this set of codependent patterns, it may speed up your healing process and journey to actually carve out space just to focus on yourself first. But the catch-22 becomes that on the flip side of that, there will be a little bit of extra healing to then do once you get into a relationship with somebody, because we can do all of this work on ourselves. But there's also another layer to that work of actually being able to apply that work when in relationship to others. And you'll see that there's elements there still left to heal and pay attention to and focus on. So with that being said, point number one is, yes and no. It can benefit your healing journey to just carve out time and focus just on yourself, especially at the beginning. But the other side is we will still have to then go back and do some of that work while dating, right? And that work really looks like being able to stay in relationship to your own needs while getting in relationship to somebody else. If you pay very close attention as an anxious, preoccupied individual, you'll probably find that you tend to be self or other oriented. So it's almost like it's mutually exclusive, like a relationship to yourself or a relationship to somebody else. And it's difficult for you to maintain both because of that preoccupied part of your attachment style. You'll often find yourself ruminating, focusing on extensively, maybe in limerence sometimes, like just hyper focus on somebody else, which you can't be hyper focused on somebody else and yourself at the same time. It's just not possible. So, having that balance and that ability to consider yourself and your needs and your other areas of life, like career goals and ambitions, your relationship to money, your physical health and well-being and how will you show up there, any spiritual journey, personal growth journey that you're in the mental, emotional, spiritual areas of life, and also other relationships, friendships, family relationships, having some sort of routine or habits where you are actually checking in with those other areas of life and having time that you give to those other areas is very vital and important. And if you find that you can't do that, you can't be checked into multiple other areas while dating, then it is a sign that, hey, you may want to take a step back before really going back into the dating pool, especially if that preoccupation causes you to self-abandon. I just wanted to pop in here and let you know we are doing a 7-day free trial to the All Access Membership Pass at PDS, which means you get access to literally everything inside of the school. And this includes the 4 live webinars I do with our students every single week. And on top of that, you get access to all of our different courses. We have over 55 different courses on relationships, communication, boundaries, emotional mastery, guilt and shame, learning your needs, so many different facets that are really important to master our lives and feel really good about our lives going forward. And last but not least, there's a daily community event We have trained facilitators and coaches who are in there doing that work, showing up to support you on your journey every single day. Please join me on the other side. Come check it out. See if it's a fit for you. I'd love to see you there. Go ahead and sign up by clicking the link in the description box below. Point number two that's very valuable here to pay attention to is that as an anxious preoccupied, you have to learn what your needs are from relationships. Like you have to learn your own personal needs and then what you need from others, because if you don't know those things, you cannot convey them properly to others. If I don't know, for example, that emotional connection to somebody and having deep conversations is part of what makes me feel fulfilled, then I may not have ever found a relationship where I know that that's a huge availability for me, right? Because I haven't expressed that that's important. And so if I was just on autopilot in dating, I might date people who don't have those qualities, who don't, connect and want to have deep conversation intellectually, philosophically, emotionally, sort of all those different facets, because I don't know that about myself. So how can I possibly communicate it to somebody else, right? So you see, like point number two, you have to take time to know your needs for you to have more successful dating and relationship experiences. It's like the prerequisite in a way to being able to date successfully and to feel like you are seen and known and can thrive. Point number three, that's a huge consideration, is you have to do the work. And you can do this while dating somebody, but you have to do the work to remove your fears of asking. I think a lot of anxious, preoccupied individuals are so scared that if they ask for a need, if they express a need, anything like that, that they will end up feeling like a burden, or they're more likely to get abandoned. And so they revert back into these old people-pleasing tendencies. But people-pleasing is always a form of self-abandonment, and it will always lead to resentment later. And there's a difference between compromising and people-pleasing. Compromising means I can know myself, I can share myself and my stance, and I can see where somebody else is coming from. And then because I truly take myself into consideration and truly know and take that person into consideration, we can find this like mutually cooperative ground. But without that, if I'm just people pleasing, I'm usually sacrificing things that I need or want or are important to me. And usually that's going to lead to resentment later on. And resentment will come out in different ways for different people, but for APs, it's often through, criticism at times, or, expressing frustration, which other attachment styles may take. Some attachment styles can take criticism really deeply to heart. Securely attached people tend to have an easier time with it, of course, but more dismissive avoidance, even fearful avoidance at times, can be quite sensitive to that and shut down, then leading the anxious person to feel more anxious because their partner shut down. And then we have this sort of vicious cycle on the go that we don't want. Point number four here is you also want to make sure that you're really checked in with your boundaries. So you want to make sure that you know what your boundaries are and what your true yeses and nos are, because in knowing those things, you won't end up self-betraying. When we betray our own boundaries or violate our own boundaries to try to garner connection from somebody else, it's a form of self-betrayal. And to some degree, that can cause you to have self-betrayal wounds, right? Like you may actually fear betrayal from other people. That's definitely more of an FA type thing at its core, but APs can have nuanced parts of that as well. And then last but not least, another really important thing is to know your standards, your boundaries, your non-negotiables. There's such important things to take into consideration if you're considering this idea of like, should I start dating? Should I take more time out towards myself? I would really look at it from the perspective of, do I trust myself at this point in my healing journey to actually stay in balance with the other areas of life? I might be imperfect, but do I trust myself to overall generally show up quite well and be able to make sure that I don't abandon my healing journey and my own personal growth and that work that I have to do on myself? Because I know that if I do, that's going to show back up for me and be mirrored back to me and reflected back by my relationship, right? The moment I have those challenges, it's probably a reflection of like things that I didn't speak up for or advocate for. By the way, if you want to check out like exactly this stuff, best course that you can just kick it off with, that you can check out for free for 7 days, is the Anxious Preoccupied Reprogramming course. It's all about reprogramming and reconditioning using principles of neuroscience and neuroplasticity, reconditioning the subconscious mind so that you can see a shift and change in these patterns. And it's very powerful to be able to do so, and makes a huge impact on your relationships. It helps you learn to self-soothe, know your needs, meet your needs, develop healthy boundaries. It really covers a lot of these different topics. And again, you can check it out for free down below for 7 days using that link. So going back to sort of the end point here is that the more you are able to be checked in with yourself while dating, the more successful your relationship is also going to be as an anxious, preoccupied person. Because if there's a continuum, we have our avoidants who need to learn how to co-regulate more effectively. They need to learn to meet everybody halfway. And we have our anxious individuals who need to learn to self-regulate and develop a relationship to themselves to come into center, and center being healthy, interdependent relationships. So you need to establish that deeper sense of self actually to benefit your relationships. It has a direct benefit on romantic partnerships and all relationships in general. So the more you can do that and the more you can carve out time to make sure those things are as in balance as possible, the more likely you are to find success in your romantic partnerships as a whole. So showing up for yourself actually translates into more successful relationships. So anyways, really important things to consider, to pay attention to. These answers, I get questions like this all the time, but it's not just black or white. So really important to be mindful of that. And thank you for watching. If this was helpful for you, if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to this channel. I put out literally a YouTube video every single day, I think for the past like 2 years, 3 years or something. So lots of content here. And if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments down below. Any questions you have about dating and healing and all those sorts of things. So thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and I will see you in future videos.